Welcome, everybody, to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and it's Thursday. You know what that means. We're here till 5 p.m. Pacific time today. It's 2-hour Thursday, and so we are going to get lots of phone calls today. And you can start calling now at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. And answering your questions today, which, by the way, your questions don't have to be about the Bible or about Christianity or doctrine or anything like that. Maybe you're just a Christian who's trying to get through life and you've got some questions that way, or you're not a Christian and you've got questions. Give us a call, 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. Answering your questions today, Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California, and Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Bobby, I see Pastor Brian wearing a baseball cap, which means he must be having a bad hair day. That's what it meant last time, so I'm assuming it means that this time, too. Is that the case? I'm just asking.
He looks good.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, it kind of. Yeah, that was it. It was. I mean, it wasn't horrible hair, but it was definitely, kind of just sticking out on the sides. And I thought, what the heck? I'll put a hat on.
Put a hat on.
Yeah. Now, Bobby, your hair, I've been noticing you got something a little bit different going here. I think it's the less gel or something, and it's kind of a little more just natural. Is that what's happening?
It could be the winds over there in North Carolina, too.
I guess so, yeah. It's I'm in the same boat. My wife, I think she wanted me to do something different. So, you do what your wife wants when it comes to the hair. She doesn't like when I scalp it on the sides, but it's really easy to go with that flow.
Yeah, but you're right. You kind of go with what the wife wants because that's
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, she's the one who cares. And so
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Bobby, it is record-breaking heat here in Southern California. Costa Mesa. Costa Mesa is 94 degrees. Now, I've been alive a long time. Mm-hmm. I've lived in this part of the world a long time. I am racking my brain trying to remember, has there ever been a 94-degree April day?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure there has been at some point, but, it's rare. It's very rare. And it's all weekend, or yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Monday, when we're going to go on a little holiday, it's going to be 67 again.
Of course. Yeah.
So...
That's how it works.
Yeah, that's how it works. That's how it works. But I didn't even, I knew it was hot because my watch was telling me the temperature, but I've been locked in my cave writing a paper for the last few days. And you know how fun that is, Bobby. I'm just...
What's your paper on?
My paper is on, let me think. What is it on? It's on pastoring.
Sounds like it's made a big impact.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the title that I gave it. What is it? It's pastoring, preaching, and church planting according to the New Testament model.
Nice.
Okay.
Lots of P's in there, like pastor's perspective.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what it is. And it's supposed to be a 12-page paper, and I've already got like 16 pages. And I'm just like rambling, like, oh my gosh, why did I even write that paragraph? So it's been a crazy sort of a day. It's been a couple of days actually that I've been working on it. So
yeah.
Yep.
So I'm looking at the 10-day weather forecast.
Yes.
Good Friday, which is a week from tomorrow, looks like it's going to be real nice. So we'd love to see you at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, Good Friday, 12 noon. You can join us for a communion service. And then on Sunday, Easter Sunday morning, there's a sunrise service at 6 and then one service at 10. Don't forget the Easter egg hunt at 9 with Pastor Brian dressed as the Easter Bunny. I'm joking. He will not be dressed as the Easter Bunny. But come on out. It's going to be great. You can get more details at cccm.com.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Great. Man, it's just amazing how quick all of this is coming upon us, isn't it? Just these months roll by so quickly.
I think it's a year of Februaries. Yeah. Every month must have just had 28 days so far, and that's why it's already April.
Yeah,
that must be it.
It does seem like that. I heard somebody say, or I read something that somebody said the other day, like once you hit a certain age, I think they said 60, it's like the year is cut in half. It just seems like 6 months and the year's already over. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
It does. You know what? It's interesting. I'm 49, but as I was doing my devotional this morning, and when we had supper last week with you and Cheryl, Brian, my wife and I were just talking to you about, how do, we go into aging without feeling depressed. And I've realized that I'm having a little bit of depression about okay, 50's coming. And I know to some that'll sound young, but yes. It's kind of like, I know it's all downhill, like as far as like health. So I've been trying to think about this, so much so that I was like, Lord, I got to deal with this. Help me to figure it out. I want to help others through whatever's going on here. If they struggle with it, I think some of the things that I'm struggling with, it's like, it seems like there's so much loss ahead, right? Like both of my wife and I, we both have our parents alive, but they're getting older, and that overwhelms me at times, the thinking about all the grief pieces. Then just going through, slowing down on my own, living in a culture that doesn't value elderly at times, like where my heart goes out to elderly, because I think sometimes people just feel worthless because of their age. And that's so sad. And so I actually got a book called Aging Gracefully that I'm going through, and I'm 49 and I don't know what the heck this is about, but I feel like my heart goes out. I just want to know how to pastor people who are aging, but I feel like I enjoyed the feeling of being young, but I can just tell like I'm turning gray. My parents are getting old. It makes me sad to picture, not being married to my wife for, 100, 200 more years. It's just all going by really fast. So having my 25th wedding anniversary, realizing, wow, well, twice that much longer, it'd be 50 years. And so would we even have that much time? So I don't know.
Wow.
Aging Gracefully is the book. If anybody is going through this existential crisis like me.
So have you started doing crossword puzzles and word searches and things like that too? I hear that keeps the mind sharp. Is that what you've done?
Oh man, my dad's amazing at that. I don't do those, no.
Yeah, Bobby, you're way too young to be worrying about that stuff right now.
Yes,
I told you,
right? But I create crises ahead of time. That's what I do. So that's part of my OCD. By the way, that is not the book. The one that I'm thinking of is by Susan Hunt and Sharon. I can't remember if it's Benson or something.
Oh, we'll find it.
It's by like a 78-year-old and an 80-year-old, and I love it. And I think Susan Hunt was the wife of the apologist Dave Hunt. If I'm not mistaken, at one time.
Interesting.
I think.
Yeah, here's one with Sharon Betters. Aging with Grace. Maybe that's it.
Aging with Grace. Okay, good. That's the problem that I had. Yeah.
Bobby, just keep hanging out with me. I'll keep reminding you about how young you actually are.
I know. You're like, dude, if you're 49, just wait till if you don't fix this, bro, you're going to have a real hard time in 10 years.
And remember what I told you? I told you that my 50s were actually a great decade. I personally felt better in my 50s than I did in my 30s, because in my 30s I had a chronic illness. And in my 50s, that largely was not the case. So, 60s have been a little slower. Haven't had quite the, what's it called? What's it in your step? The lightness in your step.
Pep in your step.
Pep in your step. That wasn't the word I was looking for.
Pep in your step.
There's another word about, something about your step.
Peppa Pig.
Peppa Pig, yeah. Lovely.
I've heard different people say that their 50s is really a wonderful decade.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I had, Robert Lewis was a mentor of mine, and that was the pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Little Rock, and he created the men's fraternity curriculum. And my first church that I planted, we were planted from that church. And one of the things that Robert helped me with so much was the different seasons of life. And I think about that even in the church from a discipleship standpoint. Like there's these different questions that we're asking, when you're getting ready to leave home from high school, what's it going to be like living out on your own? Or when you get married, you have a set of questions. When kids are coming along, you have a set of questions. When you're about to empty nest, there's a set of questions. Then we're kind of, so each of these decades brings with it a whole new set of questions. And I think that equipping people to know what do you need to expect emotionally to transition in these decades, and it's okay, and others are thinking about these things. I think a lot of that's part of being seasoned and understanding what these seasons of life represent. And for me, I can coach down, but I have no idea what it's going to be like to be someone older like you, Brian, and to experience this decay.
Well, some friends of mine sent a picture to me today from 11 years ago. We were in England together, and we were all, huddled together in some photo. I was in the middle, and I looked like an old grandpa. And I said to them, I look like your granddad in this picture. And they said, yeah, you look way younger today than you did back then. So those were my 50s.
Hey,
that's how good I was. I thought I was looking great in my 50s, but apparently I was not. I was looking old. Here's the biggest problem in your 60s. The biggest problem is weight control. This is the problem that just will not go away. How do you control your weight? I don't know.
Yeah.
Stay away from the Butterfingers.
Well, I've done that. I have stayed away from the Butterfingers, but there are a few other vices I have as well.
Got it.
Haagen-Dazs is one.
That's probably worse than Butterfingers.
Yeah, but Bobby was here. He was trying to get me to go to some new ice cream place, and and then I saw
Handles.
him eating a big
Newport.
bowl of it, and a photo that Heather took of him. And
Yes.
yeah.
So I waited till my last night in California to have ice cream. I went to that place called Hans. And then it's just when I partake, it's wheels off. And so what happened was I hit up Hans, and then the next day, I'm having a Coke. I went and bought this big cheese toffee cake pastry and pounded that. Then I got out some pound cake. And literally, I slept way beyond the amount of hours I should have because I think I just shocked my body with sugar.
Yeah.
But I love the dopamine hit of just taking a massive amount of sugar in and just, obsessing on it. But then I just wake up and think, why did I do that? And then I starved myself for a day of repentance. So I have this really twisted relationship with myself of taking it in and then inflicting myself with judgment.
Wow.
Just eat kale and arugula all day long. That'll help you. Yeah.
Chase that.
You know what? I'm hot.
Chase that cake with kale salad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We better get off this topic and get on to something more edifying.
Like Bible questions and stuff,
Talking
maybe?
about chia seeds or
things that are of eternal value.
Yes. 888-564-6173 is our number. Here is a Facebook question sent in by Kamala. I don't think it's that Kamala, but you never know. It might be. With all of the recent documentaries and podcasts like the Bethel Hillsong documentary and the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast, how would you suggest we minister to fellow believers who have been caught up in these movements? Also, do you feel like it's God who is exposing all of these ministers who have had problems with spiritual abuse and excess popularity in these mega ministries? Or is it a case of, in the last days, God's people being led astray by having itching ears? Brian, what would you say?
Well, those are some serious questions. I do think there's something to a kind of a purging that the Lord is doing with his own people, because the Bible actually tells us that that is the case. Peter says it in 2 Peter when he's talking about judgment. He says judgment begins at the house of God. And if it begins with us, then what will be the outcome for those who reject the Lord? So It does seem to me, because there's so many of these things being exposed and so many high-profile people who have, at one point appeared to be just invincible and, doing things that nobody's ever done before as far as church growth and expanding the kingdom and so forth. And then to see so many of them being exposed for bad behavior, sinful behavior. So I do personally think there is something of the Lord's work in it to cleanse the church. I mean, the church is God's church, and He will do that. And I think that He is doing that to some degree.
Bobby, what would you say?
Yeah, I agree. It has been interesting to see. I also think the paradigm of church that we thought would be effective in retaining true biblical disciples is proven to be false. I think that if we are going to equip people to survive crises in our culture, like the moral collapse that we're experiencing, or even a COVID-19 quarantine, when you think of the statistics of people who have failed to come back to churches, I think that it's so important that we regroup and really consider, what are we trying to make a disciple to be like? And we're trying to call them to be like Christ. Well, what did Christ do? I mean, he shrunk his crowds, and then he asked the remnant, do you want to leave as well? And I think that we have got to know that we can't compromise the gospel and truth for the sake of things like being hip and cool and entertaining, and not giving people theology and ignoring the matters that are happening in front of us. Like, if we as pastors say, we're just going to turn a blind eye to what's taking place with this moral revolution, and we don't feel like we need to equip our congregations how to dialogue in their current context, well, guess what? A lot of them will just go the way of culture, or they'll think by our silence that we are in alignment with culture. And so I think sometimes the task is really daunting for pastors, but we got to do more to equip people so that they can be true disciples of the cross. And I'm speaking to myself in this way as well. We really need to be thinking about the cost of discipleship, to use a phrase by a book by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who understood it, who paid with his life. And I think that whether it's Hillsong or any of these other things, I mean, creating an emotional moment, or, like one of the things I loved about this church plant that we have, we're now meeting in a really great facilities, but we just had this ragtag looking facilities, and we just kept teaching the people that it's not about the building, it's not about the facilities. But when we make it all about our sexy facilities and all of our amazing ministries, well, you know what? It's not going to be enough if the church has to go underground, and we built a church on thinking that that's what it's all about. And so I think we need to get back to real New Testament community, kind of probably about what you're writing about, I'm guessing, this past week, Brian.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that in there. The first part of the question was about how do you help those who have maybe been burned or stumbled or disillusioned by those kinds of things. Well, I think the first thing is be gracious, and then just try to humbly show them that really wasn't the right way to go in the first place. That let's get back to some real basic, simple stuff. Yeah, whenever you blow something up and turn it into a platform for celebrities and things like that, even if it's in Jesus' name, there is a point, I think, where that all is going to implode, and that's what we're seeing. And it's interesting because there's different, like you take the contrast between Mars Hill and Hillsong, two entirely different situations. two entirely different Christian cultures. Mars Hill is very much a Bible culture and a preaching culture. The problem in Mars Hill was, personal arrogance and a kind of, a big power trip is kind of what that boiled down to.
True.
Where Hillsong is, Bible light. Not, you're not going to go to a Hillsong and hear necessarily an exposition of 1 Corinthians 6, where Paul's talking about those who will not inherit the kingdom of God. You're going to have a lot of emotion. You're going to have a lot of emphasis on the emotional side of things through the music, which is great music, by the way. But how in both cases, whether it's the abusive situation in Mars Hill and the power trip or the extravagance that was seen on the platform of Hillsong, and the the kind of the lack of biblical seriousness when it comes to the culture and the sins of the culture. I think that these are two different. My point is, these are two different things, but they result in the end in the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They implode.
So, even in the case of Mars Hill, like you said, they were a strong Bible teaching church. So that just proves that it can even happen at a strong Bible teaching
and I think
church.
Mars Hill is a classic example of the idea that gospel doctrine, which they would have been all about, must produce gospel culture, or we're completely missing the point. And what we mean by gospel culture is a culture of goodness, a culture of grace, a culture of humility and servanthood and those things. Those are to be the byproducts of gospel doctrine. But in the case of Mars Hill, you had strong emphasis on gospel doctrine, but it didn't translate into gospel culture. And so, and the reason I wanted to bring that up is because sometimes you can think, oh, well, hey, we're not like those guys. We're into the Bible. We preach the Bible. And, of course they did what they did because they're not rooted in the Bible. Well, you can be rooted in the Bible, but not letting the Bible transform you into likeness to Jesus. And that, in the end, is going to create the same problems.
Yep. Bobby Conway.
I just think that was a great point, Brian, to bring out. I mean, you can have the head right and your heart can be jacked up. You can have the heart seemingly right and your head's not grounded. And this is where we need a true integration in our ministry, worshiping in truth and spirit.
Kamala, thanks for sending in your question on facebook.com/pastorsperspective. Let's do one more from Facebook before we go to the phones at 888-564-6173. I know someone who has been carrying heavy guilt, even wondering if they are not allowed in heaven because they crossed a line when they were a preteen. He was raised in a very sheltered Christian home with very little interaction with anyone, extremely lonely, and I believe just searching for connection and guidance. He received very little from his parents. Their idea of raising him well was homeschooling him and shutting him up in the house to keep him from, quote-unquote, evil. He said he found a tape of his dad's about rock and roll stars who sold their souls to the devil for money. As a kid, he watched this and he thought he wanted that too. He wanted to be rich and famous, so he started praying to the devil, thinking he could try and sell his soul. He didn't have any experiences of any kind. His mom, a prayer warrior, but also very neglectful of him, would say she felt spiritual warfare in the home. Granted, I hear her say this all the time, even still. I think he was very hurt and confused by the way his parents shared God with him. It was all about going to church on Sundays and doing the right things, but very little relationship with each other. Since then, he has given his life to the Lord, serves in his church, reads his Bible, has a relationship, but he still gets attacked in his mind sometimes and wonders if what he did was unforgivable. Brian, what do you say?
Well, that's both a sad story and but a nice ending. Mm-hmm. And it's not over yet. But to transition from that negative experience to where he's at today. Well, I would just say, where you're at today is proof in and of itself that none of that was a real transaction with the devil. The devil doesn't own anything. He steals things. He's a thief. He came to rob, to kill, and to destroy. But he doesn't own anything. God created us, and Jesus redeemed us, which means he paid the penalty for us. So in a sense, you can't even really sell your soul to the devil because it doesn't belong to you in the first place. And the devil has no right over it in that sense, like an irrevocable sense. Of course, if you give yourself over to evil and to Satan, he will take you up on it, and he will, probably give you some kudos here and there to get you to work for him. But in the end, even for a person who does that, it's not an irrevocable transaction because Christ owns us ultimately. And when we yield ourselves to him, when we ask him to forgive us, then whatever claim or hold the devil had on us through whatever means he had it, I would say that the totality of Scripture would teach that is broken.
And just to be clear, selling your soul to the devil or thinking you're selling your soul to the devil is not the unforgivable sin.
No. Resisting Jesus to the grave is the unforgivable sin.
Mm-hmm.
That's what.
And that's obviously not what.
Yeah, it's obviously what he's done.
Yeah. Bobby, any thoughts from you?
Nope, that was great.
All right. Thanks for sending in your question on Facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective using the Messenger feature. Here's AJ in California. How can we help you, AJ?
Hey, guys. Yeah, kind of similar to that question, I suppose, is that when a different religion prays to their own gods or idols, it's kind of easy to say, those prayers aren't heard or they go to Satan or whatever. But what about people like Mormons who pray to Jesus, but it's the wrong Jesus? I mean, where do those prayers go? Is Jesus just putting them into his cosmic junk mail, or what happens? And then if we teach them about the true Jesus in the gospel, how can we make sure that they pray to the real Jesus when in their minds they already are, if they come to that conversion moment?
Yeah, Bobby, what would you say to AJ?
I think that we would have to concede that religious experience goes beyond Christians and what we talk about as it relates to our own experience. That is to say that Hindus would talk about religious experience, Mormons would talk about a religious experience, mystics would talk about New Age experience. And so given these different belief systems that pray, and then you think about what we talk about, oh, God did this or God answered this prayer. We need to be prepared that we could bump into other individuals that might also feel like under another belief system that their God has answered their prayers. And so then that can create some confusion. Now, what we need to realize is obviously because God is all-knowing, he knows what everybody is doing and what everybody is praying. So that's something that we could bring out. I think that God can discern the difference between a genuine person's prayer and somebody who is disingenuous. So let's say somebody's in a culture they'd never even heard of Jesus, but they're praying to God. So I think that there's this element where God hears prayers, and then sometimes people say, well, God doesn't answer the prayers of non-believers. Well, he answers the prayers every time somebody gets saved. God just answered the prayer of a non-believer. I hear the music. Let me finish developing this on the other side of the break.
Is 2 minutes enough time for you to finish developing, Bobby, you think? It'll have to be.
Do I have 2 minutes right now?
No, never mind. I didn't say it correctly. But we'll be back in 2 minutes, so hopefully that'll give you enough time to develop the answer further.
In your brain,
okay.
you can
Yes.
develop it
Yes.
over the break. 2 minutes.
Yes. AJ, thanks for calling. Stay on hold. We'll be right back with you, and everybody else that's on hold will get to your questions as well before 5 p.m. Pacific time today. It's 2-hour Thursday. We'd love to hear from you at 888-564-6173. Brian Brodersen and Bobby Conway answering your questions at 888-564-6173. Call now, 888-564-6173. Hey there. Welcome back to Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call us till 5 p.m. Pacific time today. My name is Brian Perez, and answering your questions today are Brian Brodersen and Bobby Conway. Right before the break, we were talking to AJ in California, who wanted to know when people in other religions pray to their false gods, yet think they're praying to the real Jesus, where do those prayers go? And Bobby was in the middle of answering that question when we had to go to break. So, Bobby, take it away.
Yeah, so let me just kind of step back and recap and bullet point. God is all-knowing. So when we say that God doesn't hear our prayers, then that means, it begs the question, what does that mean? Do we want to say that God's not all-knowing? So, for example, God knows every thought in our minds, according to 1 Chronicles 28:9. In Jeremiah 14, verses 11 and 12, we read, "The Lord said to me, do not pray for the welfare of this people. Though they fast, I will not hear their cry. And though they offer burnt offering and grain offering, I will not accept them." So there is a type of person who can pray, and it's not that God doesn't hear, it's just he doesn't respond because of their religiosity. Now, here's the thing. You can have somebody who's not a believer genuinely seeking who God is in prayer, and I think that God would be responsive. And you can have a genuine Christian, but not genuinely seeking God, and God wouldn't respond because this person's going through the religious motions. So all that to say, where do prayers then go if they are offered up to other gods? Well, if they're knowingly offered up to like Allah or these other gods, I think that they're just falling flat. It's not like they're being answered. But then what do we do about the person who gives an account as a Muslim or as a Mormon of a circumstance in which it appeared to them as if God answered their prayer? Because when I was going through my doubts, I thought, boy, God, if a non-believer prays and you answer it without them knowing who you are, then wouldn't that only reinforce them more in their false belief? And so I thought that's a little bit of a quandary. But I would say when it comes to God, he lets the rain fall on the righteous and the unrighteous. So God, I could see how people who have come out of Mormonism as into Christianity or other things, they might have sensed that God was at work, just like I sensed God's hand protecting me and at work in my life long before I was a Christian. That's because God is gracious. That doesn't mean because God answers a prayer that he's validating all the belief system of that individual at that time any more than God's validating everything about my life currently because I pray to him and other parts of my life are out of whack. It just means that God is benevolent and good. So when it comes then down to it, Christianity, it's a pound for pound discussion. It offers a stronger cumulative case. There are other things, like, for example, Muslims use the same arguments for the existence of God that Christians do, right? They'll talk about the cosmological argument. They'll talk about the teleological argument. So there's things that we share because all truth is God's truth with one another. But when you look at the strength of the overall case of Christianity, pound for pound, the cumulative case of Christianity is stronger, and prayer and answers to prayers plays one such part. So, does God hear the prayers of the unrighteous that are a part of other faith systems? Of course he hears, but I don't think he's answering their prayers unless they're genuinely seeking to know who the true God is.
Any thoughts, Brian?
How could I have any more thoughts than that on that topic? I concur with the great doctor. All of those things.
It was pretty all-encompassing.
But what does AJ think is the bigger question?
That's true.
That's exactly right, yeah.
AJ, it's all on you. What do you think, man?
No, I really appreciate it. I've had an opportunity for the last couple of months to minister to some Mormon missionaries, and that's kind of the point in the conversation where we're at. That's just totally helpful, and I'm meeting with them again tomorrow, so hopefully I can share a small grain of that wisdom. And also, Bobby, I recently finished your book, Guiding Towards Faith, and it was so good. It was a blessing. My coworker is using it with his daughter now, who went to college and kind of doesn't believe in God right now, and I highlighted so much of it. It's pointing. Every page is just full of highlights. So I don't know. You should think about doing this full time, start a church or a podcast or something.
Cool.
Oh, thank you so much, and I'm so thankful that served to encourage you. And all the best in your conversation with, Mormons. They'll invite us, as you know, to read the Book of Mormon and just pray for a burning in the bosom. So they're wide open to a religious experience. And that's why a religious experience really isn't enough either. I mean, because we need to make sure that our religious experience corresponds to the truth of Christianity. And their religious experience doesn't correspond to the truth of Christianity. And we are to be leery in that.
But, Bobby, I think you made a good point, and I think that we need to just recognize this, that, God is God, and God, God is going to do things at times that we would think, well, wait a second, you can't do that because they believe in an idol, and you're actually hearing them pray, and you're even helping them. I mean, that you shouldn't do that, God. But, God can do what he wants, and, God loves people. And I think that God is seeking to draw people to him. So I believe that there are times, I've said it this way, God is under no obligation to answer your prayer, but he very well might answer your prayer simply because he chooses to do so, because, he loves you and he wants you to come to himself. Christians, in a sense, God is obligated to answer our prayer. We become his children, and he's given us certain promises and told us, to pray and to ask, so we can have that confidence. But I don't think that exempts others from God working in their lives, and even to the point of at times answering their prayer to show them that he is actually real. And they might not see it at the time, but maybe further down the road, they look back and realize, maybe, they come to Christ and they look back and realize, wow, God was bringing me along all of these years. I didn't see it for what it was back then, but now I see it clearly. You know, you think of Paul. Paul says, I was separated from my mother's womb to preach the gospel. Well, what about the times when Paul was actually going out trying to arrest and kill Christians? It doesn't seem like he was separated at that point, but he was. And so, yeah, I think that's a great thing.
You know, Brian, I think you said something last week when we were on the radio together that was really powerful, and it's stuck with me this past week. I've thought about it. You might remember the caller. She called up. She was burdened about her father, and her father wouldn't go to the funeral of a Jehovah's Witness that died because he was a Christian. And the daughter was really torn up. She was confused by this. And you said, you know, just because we're Christians, it doesn't mean that we should, lose sight of our humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes what happens is we become a Christian and then it becomes us versus them.
Yeah.
And we lose our humanity, like, oh, I got to separate from this person. I can't do this. And we're not to compromise in our own beliefs, but just being with somebody in the midst of their grief. So all that to say, why would it be hard for us as a Christian to imagine somebody who offers a prayer up, and they don't know Jesus, but they're hurting and their heart's breaking and they haven't had the opportunity to hear the gospel, and they're just in this moment, you know, in sincerity, just saying, God, whoever you are out there, will you just comfort me, help me. And if they just sensed God's presence, wouldn't that be God? Like in other words, you said we shouldn't lose sense of our humanity. Well, how much more would God not lose sense of his deity, which is even so much greater? Yeah. And so I think, like, what's the big deal if somebody's hungry and they're not a Christian and they decided to lift a prayer up and God answered the prayer? Like, what does that mean? So it doesn't mean that it's a salvific prayer that got them into a relationship that reconciled them, but it wouldn't surprise me to think that a God would answer the prayer of a sincere person who's hurting and broken and confused. And so I hear the objector retorting, going, but what about the verses that say that God doesn't hear the prayers of the wicked? Well, I think it's different. I think we're talking about people who are religious and they're just offering sacrifices and they're offering the prayers, going through the motions, or if somebody's just completely vile. But how many people have we met that are just genuinely nice people? They don't understand the gospel yet, but they might lift up a prayer. And if God wanted to answer them, that doesn't compromise God's character. And I think Christians get worked up thinking, well, how dare we say that God would be so benevolent to do that to a non-Christian? Because God's only going to do that if they're on the inside, but they're on the outside. Yeah. And we get like that.
Yeah. And I think we, I really think it comes down to, I mean, in the end, do we really know the nature of God? Do we really know what his heart is like? Do we understand his deep, deep love for people? Or do we think of him as just a judge and angry and waiting impatiently almost to bring down his wrath on sinners? And I do think that sometimes that is the image of God that we get in our minds. And so we think God is angry with all these people. He hates them because of their sin. And so I need to behave in like manner. I need to shun them, or I need to make sure that they understand that God's not going to help them or be with them. I do think it's a faulty theology on our part.
Yeah. Yeah, like imagine, okay, we're only going to give food to hungry Christians. Like if we as human people get that, hey, if somebody's hungry and they're not a Christian and they ask for food, we would want to respond to that request.
Yeah.
But then we'll say God wouldn't respond to the request of the hungry because they're not a Christian.
Yeah.
But then we would, like, as if we're better than God. We'll respond to the requests of non-Christians and do things for them. So I think we box ourselves in some funky ways at times.
But even Jesus, Jesus says that, be like your Father in heaven, who causes the sun to shine on the just and the unjust, who brings rain upon the righteous and the wicked. So, God shows a common grace to all human beings. And I think that really should be the posture that we have as believers, right? And especially since we have been the recipients of grace. We've been the recipients of special grace, not just common grace. So, to think of, and I think sometimes it goes back to, we don't remember our own lost state and the kind of mercy that God had on us. And what if God would have treated us the way that we think he actually treats people? We would be in big trouble. We wouldn't be where we're at right now. So, yeah, a lot of things there.
Great conversation. By the way, the book that Bobby wrote, the one that AJ highly recommends, it's called Doubting Toward Faith. It's by Bobby Conway. You can pick that up. You can order it, I should say, at oneminuteapologist.com. Check it out. Again, it's called Doubting Toward Faith, and you've got 3 or 4 other books available for purchase there, plus one on the way. We can't wait till that one comes out.
Yeah, and I'd say go to Amazon to get the books, because I've ran out of some of the Doubting Toward Faith copies. So it's okay to go to Amazon. You can find it there.
But we don't want to give Jeff our money. We want to give you all of our money, Bobby.
Right.
Jeff has enough money. All right, AJ, thanks for calling. Next, we're going to go to Jesse. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Jesse.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hey, Mr. Perez, I love you, dude.
Well, thanks, man.
Hey, Bobby Conway, you're my best friend. You just don't know it, dude.
Oh man, well, thank you, bro.
Brian Brodersen. I mean, your name says enough, man. So let me ask you guys something. This bothered me. I had this argument with all my family, my friends, all my peers. So alcohol versus sugar versus salt versus your daily stuff. My question is why so it wouldn't be okay for a pastor to overindulge in alcohol, right?
Right.
That's the negative.
Right. For a Christian, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What about, that's correct, okay. What about for him to overindulge in food?
Well, I think they're two.
I hear just as earlier. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, sir.
Yeah, it's okay.
Earlier, while you were talking, we were joking. I was listening to you guys joke and have fun time on food, poor eating strategy.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was Bobby. That was all Bobby. Bobby's the one that had the.
Yeah, I did. I slid out bad.
Bobby's my idol, so he gets kind of bad.
Don't make me an idol.
Just kidding, Bobby. I know you're normal like me.
Yeah.
Yes. Basically, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt again.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
but
you hear Greg Laurie, he jokes about eating donuts and shit. I mean, stuff.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Well, Bobby
he needs to knock it off. Greg really needs to quit that.
But Bobby, I think you really are the perfect person to answer this question from your own experience, because you have a conviction that alcohol is off limits to you, but we know that ice cream is not off limits to you because you told us that in so many words at the beginning of the program. But what is the difference between those two things? I think there is a pretty significant difference. So what do you say?
Yeah. I would say that, Jesse, if I was abusing food all the time, like that would be a problem, right? Like I will have I will skid out periodically and just, it's wheels off with sugar. But I do try really hard to take care of myself, all in all. Like my wife's a nutritionist. I watch what I eat, and I would say probably 9 meals out of 10, are hopefully healthy, maybe 8 out of 10. And then when I do spin out, like I said, I will typically make up for it by eating lighter the next day. So in other words, I think that you can have some fun with food like that. But if I ate like that all the time, then it wouldn't be temple care, and it could really destroy you. But I really think that the big thing is the lack of self-control as it relates to how it impacts others. Sure, there are people who lack self-control with sugar intake. I think I was lacking some self-control the other day while I was kind of on the sugar binge. But it wasn't impacting my wife and my kids. Man, when you get inebriated, it is just, Jesse, bar the door. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. And that is the danger of it. So there have, you've never met somebody who sat down and said, honey, I need to confess. I had an affair on you and my heart's broken. And well, what caused it? Well, I found myself bumping into a Mr. Goodbar at the candy station, and I ate the Mr. Goodbar, and I just lost all sense of self-control. And, then I followed up with a Snickers, and man, it was just wheels off. And before you know it, I was having an affair. Well, that's never the story. Like, oh, I went to Cold Stone and went out and had an affair, and you blame it on the Cold Stone. And I think you probably get my point on the difference.
That is a very good point. And you know what? It reminds me of something else. We were talking earlier about the Hillsong documentary and everything, and all these things that have come out since that documentary about the head of Hillsong. Can't think of his name right now. But Brian Houston. But one of the things that they say happened was that he had been drinking when he approached one of these women. So again, he may not have even been drunk, but again, he was just he was buzzed enough to have tried to do something. Doesn't look like he went through with it, but it was still there.
Yeah, and that's really the issue. None of those other things, all the different food categories that we could talk about could possibly have negative consequences for your body. And yet none of them alter your mind or alter your judgment or make you susceptible to that kind of sin. So I think the comparison, the scripture, mostly like in Proverbs, it warns about gluttony and things like that. And gluttony is, back in the Roman days where you would have these eating orgies where basically you would just literally eat yourself to where you were sick, and then you would go to the vomitorium and puke it all up and then go back in for another round.
Oh my gosh.
That's the kind of stuff when the Bible's talking about gluttony. That's the kind of stuff it's talking about. So I think that these are, in a sense, they're kind of two different categories. And there's never a place in Scripture where it warns about too much hummus. You overdid it on the pita bread. It's just not, we don't find that there. But we find plenty of warnings about alcohol.
That being said, couldn't somebody who eats really healthy, they're eating healthy all the time, they are in such good shape, that could lead to an affair? In a roundabout kind of way, because all of a sudden they start thinking that they're, way cool and look at my body and everything else.
Well, it certainly could. Many things can lead to an affair.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be drunk to have an affair.
Right.
Many things can lead to it, but I think just specifically the alcohol question. I think the comparison,
totally,
is not really a valid comparison. I think they're two different. They're apples and oranges here.
Mm-hmm. Healthy apples, healthy oranges.
Now imagine that, Brian, for your discussion, Perez. So, why I noticed you haven't worked out in a couple years. Well, sweetheart, I'm really worried that I might have an affair if I start taking care of myself.
Right,
so
exactly.
I'm abstaining.
That's right. Yes, because I can get in trouble if I eat too much kale. Jesse, thanks for calling us today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go to Kate in Colorado. Welcome to the program, Kate.
You guys are too funny. I so totally enjoy the program. I have a question. I've struggled with all these things, and Bobby, 49. Whew, I'm 71, and I'm blind, and I've had all kinds of things, and all it has done to me is driven me closer to the Lord. I have the joy of the Lord. I have peace in my heart. I am happy. Most people think I look like I'm 50. And so I think the key to life is just having a close walk with Jesus Christ.
Yep.
My question today is, I had a lady call me today. I've had a rug business for 34 years, and she's an old customer of mine. And she calls me because she knows I'm a sold-out Christian. And she wants to know how she can help her daughter, who is a witch and involved with witchcraft. And I'm like, pray for her and just keep praying. And she's not lost until she dies.
How old is this daughter?
I could give her, but pardon me?
How old is the daughter?
I want to guess about in her 40s. She's got a daughter that's 8 and another daughter that's 12, and they want to wear the cross, and she doesn't want a cross in there, and the little girls hide the cross so they can have them.
Oh, wow. Brian, what would you say to Kate?
Well, Kate, I think that your advice was solid. And I mean, this is a spiritual battle, and you have somebody who's resistant to listening to the truth. And so how do you penetrate that? And I think the way to begin is to pray that God will open her eyes, soften her heart, push back the demonic influences, and then just wait and see what happens, because she's not open to any kind of correction or challenging of her beliefs, apparently. So where do you go from there? And I think your advice to her to pray, and I would just add, get other people praying with you. And that's something I think sometimes we can even be ashamed of a situation, so we don't want to let other people know, so we just kind of keep it to ourselves. But we need prayer support. And so I would encourage her, hey, let's pray together, or get a few friends, and let's start storming heaven and asking him, the Lord, to deliver your family from this.
Great advice. Kate, thanks for your calling with your question. We are out of time for this hour of the program, but we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with another hour's worth full of questions. Is that proper English? I don't know. You never know with me. But give us a call, 888-564-6173. Going to keep the phone lines open until 5 p.m. Pacific time. And you can watch us on Facebook and YouTube as well, 888-564-6173. Pastor's Perspective is sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.